Mrs. Gandhi tried it then, and finally, after 19 months, she called for election, which she lost.
Yeah.
Question is, the Indian people did teach her a lesson that people can be fooled for some time, people can be cowed down for some time, but the creative ability of the people and their ability to resist is much, much larger today. Of course, this bill is not in public domain. Even the last iteration of this bill, from what we know, has been circulated only to select few.
Okay.
And they have been circulated to select few as well. The numbers are they're individually numbered.
Okay.
So if anybody writes anything, then they know who the leak is. If they do it, then will they not fall foul of what is called 19(1) of the Constitution, the right to free speech.
Yeah.
So all those things are there. But yes, they can make, I guess, life more difficult for individuals. Democracy is protected, safeguarded, not by the courts, not by media, but really by the people.
നമസ്കാരം. തികച്ചും ഏകാധിപത്യപരമായ ജനാധിപത്യ വിരുദ്ധമായ പൗരസ്വാതന്ത്ര്യ ധ്വംസനങ്ങൾക്കെതിരെ നിരന്തരമായി പോരാടിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഇന്ത്യയിലെ ഏറ്റവും മുതിർന്ന മാധ്യമപ്രവർത്തകരിൽ ഒരാളാണ് എനിക്കൊപ്പം ഇന്നുള്ളത്. ന്യൂസ്ക്ലിക്ക് പോർട്ടലിൻ്റെ സ്ഥാപകനും എഡിറ്റർ ഇൻ ചീഫുമായ ശ്രീ പ്രബീർ പുർക്കായസ്ഥ. പ്രതിലോമ രാഷ്ട്രീയ ശക്തികൾക്കെതിരെ നിരന്തരം പോരാടിയതിൻ്റെ പ്രതികാരമെന്നോണം അദ്ദേഹത്തെ UAPA ചുമത്തി ജയിലിലിടുക പോലും ഉണ്ടായി. അടുത്തിടെയാണ് അദ്ദേഹം സുപ്രീം കോടതിയുടെ ഇടപെടൽ മൂലം ജയിൽ മോചിതനായത്. So, sir, I'll just start with a news item that has appeared in today's Deshabhimani. Literal translation of this heading is Shackles on Online Media. And this evening, you are going to talk about the emergence and relevance of alternative media in Indian democracy. So, let's start with this bill, which is clearly meant for putting shackles on online media and all sorts of people who are talking against these kind of draconian laws. Can you share your views on this?
Well, let's separate two parts to this bill itself.
Yeah.
One is, of course, as you said, it's the earlier bills or the earlier act was when television was there.
Yeah.
And it's after the newspapers, which have been there for a long time. Television was new,
Yeah.
1995. So the question is how to control that. And now what we have is not just social media, not just digital platforms like yours now. You are also having a digital platform. But it is also what people talk among themselves virtually, because social media, as it is called, is really about people, all kinds of people, putting their views on small groups, bigger groups, transmitting to others, and so on. So this is not just simply shackles on digital platforms, which could be organized, but also individuals who might have followed.
Yeah.
Now, for instance, there are people who are, what is it called in social media terms? Influencers.
Yeah, influencers.
And you have some of the influencers whose reach are millions. You have Ravish, you have Dhruv Rathi, you have Abhisar Sharma. So there's a huge reach of these people that we have at the moment. And they are seen to be also creating problems from this government's shackles already on the media.
Yeah.
So the fact is that's been for them, the big media has been something they have found easy to control. The various levers of power that they have. And even those channels who earlier had made some critical noises, the people were sacked. So once Punna Prashun Vajpayee and Abhisar Sharma were in, I think, ABP News, and they had to leave, they were asked to go. So the issue is big media has been always easy to control by the government because they can crack down on them using income tax, for example, in not giving them access to even the internet by interrupting their transmission. That's supposed to be what also can happen. And then, of course, for smaller newspapers, it's the newsprint, advertisements, all of that are involved, and particularly government advertisements today. So all of that were different ways of doing it. But those laws were already there. They have been used, abused, if you will. The courts have intervened on various counts. But this is a completely new, completely different arena where individuals are also now might need to register as people who are doing digital communication, media, and so on. So I think this is much bigger in its intent. The question is, can a government really control its citizens? Because really what you're trying is not just media, but the normal communication people are doing today through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and so on. Is it possible for them to really do it? That is the big question.
And in our times, each individual is a media institution.
Can become.
Yeah.
Can become, yes.
That's the fact that disturbs them, maybe.
Yes, this is the change in technology.
Yeah.
That when you talk about mass media, it was what used to be called a broadcast model. That means one who broadcasts to millions of people.
Yeah.
A newspaper is printed, it goes, circulates, has a wide readership. But when the internet comes, it breaks that and it makes it possible for people to talk to each other. Of course, ultimately, we really don't talk through the internet. We talk through Google, Facebook. Basically, these are the platforms with which we talk, Twitter. But what happens is still the content is created by the people. A lot of people create the content. It's that collective content which then goes out through various social media platforms, as it is called today. Now, in that, the possibility of individual voices become important. And if they do so, how does government control that? That is the intent of this bill, clearly. Of course, this bill is not in public domain. Even the last iteration of this bill, from what we know, has been circulated only to select few.
Okay.
And they have been circulated to select few as well. The numbers are they're individually numbered.
Okay.
So if anybody writes anything, then they know who the leak is. Okay, they can trace that.
Yeah.
So given that we don't have anything in the public domain, what we have is much earlier what was a paper which the government had circulated as this draft or what the bill was supposed to be. But apparently this bill has gone much beyond that. Yeah. So that is no longer, that's not in public domain. We have no access to it. We don't know what it is, but it is under discussion. But as I said, the intent, if we take the previous iteration of the bill, which was in public domain, is very clear. The intent is to bring all those who use social media who have a certain following under the ambit of this bill and therefore try and control them. The question that I have to the government as well as to my viewers, your viewers, is it possible to shackle the people? Anybody can do that. Anybody can today write, do things on using the social media platforms that exist. Is it possible to individually control all of them? And does the government have the wherewithal to do it? And if they do it, then will they not fall foul of what is called 19(1) of the Constitution, the right to free speech? Yeah. So all those things are there. But yes, they can make, I guess, life more difficult for individuals.
That has happened in your case when you were arrested and put jail for some time. But I saw you, facing all these things with such cool demeanor, and I was wondering, you were smiling all the time. How could you do that?
Well, there are two ways to face adversity. To smile and face it or cry and face it. I think smiling and facing it is a relatively better way to do it than crying about it. Or get angry and increase your blood pressure. Yeah. Of course, you do get angry, but the question is that doesn't help. Getting away from the demeanor, how I looked or how I took it. See, At least I have a prior history. I was in jail during emergency 48, 49 years back. So to see another authoritarian regime, another authoritarian exercise of power is not surprising, or it is not something new for my generation. I'm not going to say to all of us, but my generation, yes. The question is, ultimately democracy is not safeguarded, but the intention of the rulers. Democracy is protected, safeguarded, not by the courts, not by media, but really by the people. And people, how they react, how they are going to think about this, how do they express themselves in different ways, what are their struggles to retain their freedom of speech and freedom of action. These are what determines whether a ruling party, ruling formation succeeds in its attempt to muzzle the people or it doesn't. Mrs. Gandhi tried it then, and finally after 19 months she called for election, which she lost.
Yeah.
Question is, the Indian people did teach her a lesson. And then when she again won after 3 years, when the Janata government fell, interestingly, we were all worried that maybe she will be authoritarian again. But here it was the issue that the people had gauged that she will not do this again. And they were right. Yeah. She did not. For 2 years she was there. She was assassinated in 84. Yeah. But till that point of time, she decided, yes, she had learned a lesson. She was not going to do an emergency again. So the problem that we have with the current regime is that though the people have registered their disapproval of what they're doing in the last elections, they still think more of the same will win them. Maybe they'll be able to recover. But that's something which they have to understand, that people can be fooled for some time, people can be cowed down for some time, but the creative ability of the people and their ability to resist is much, much larger today. It's much stronger today. The potential for resistance is much, much larger today. And as you can see next door, for instance, what is happening. Yeah. Now, all of that shows that, yes, without the consent of the people, you cannot really govern. And once you start losing that trust, then unless you change your ways, then it doesn't really work. And I think that's a lesson this government and this administration has to learn.
I remember something soon after your release from jail this time. You were talking to the media or in a function, and you were telling Indian people know how to discipline their leaders. And you said with a smile that anyway, June 4th is going to come. Let's see what will happen. And it was quite prophetic, right?
Well, yes and no. They're still there. So, but we are hoping they have taken the verdict of the people to heart. But if this is the way they go, then I have to say that they haven't. So we'll have to see how much they allow the parliament to debate, how much they allow the regional forces, particularly the state governments, to function, how much they respect both the fundamental rights that are enshrined in the Constitution, the constitutional values that are there, and also the kind of political democracy which should be there not only for the people but also for the states. The central government is only one part of the government. The other part of the government, the state governments. And this constitution allowed both to have respective spheres in which they would be supposedly the leaders. So that structure is also under threat. Those which are state subjects are being now attacked in different ways. Money is being withheld. So all these things show that the lesson has yet to be fully internalized. The people might have expressed their opinion, but it doesn't look like the government has yet internalized it.
Yeah. And I'm quoting from one of your interviews once again. Some are citizens and some should not be citizens, you said. Even if they are citizens, they should not have full representation. They should not talk about politics. They should preferably not even vote. And if they vote, they shall not have any candidate that they can support. This is what you said.
Is the intention of all dictatorial regimes, authoritarian regimes, and this one seems to be in that mold.
You were jailed during the emergency in the 70s. Now there is a sort of undeclared emergency. That's what we say. What's the difference that you see between these two periods? That happened in the last century. Now we are almost quarter of a century.
Well, that's what I wrote my book, my memoirs, if you will. That was essentially from that emergency and what we are now. And how we have to resist dictatorial regimes, so whatever hue they are. And there are significant differences, there are significant similarities. All authoritarian regimes, all would-be authoritarian regimes, some of them are would-be because they haven't done what was done during emergency. But the intention is that don't disagree with us. We know what to do, and you have to just do what we tell you to. This is the intent of any authoritarian regime, that you may think what you want, but in public space, you have to strictly limit yourself to what we tell you to do and what we allow you to do. So I think that intent is there. But there is a difference that whatever it is, the system that we got last 75 years and more post-independence, that has developed also a resilience. That has also developed a certain character of how they deal with our rulers. So this is not something, this collective memory and this history cannot be wiped out that easily. So intent is one issue. Yes, instruments of power is the second issue, and the central government has that. Third is the kind of divisions they're posing in the people by which you cannot unite, split it in different ways. Those splits then make it difficult to build a larger unity. All of this is true, but at the same time, we have seen even at the worst of times, if you will, during last elections, the mandate even in Ayodhya did not go to BJP. Now that was very striking because it meant that even the people of Ayodhya are unhappy that this is the way the government is conducting itself. Now, here is the issue that you built a whole campaign on Ayodhya. And when it came after building the Ram temple, they thought, that will make at least an impact in UP. And certainly in the belt that is really where Ayodhya is. But even there, people were not willing to vote them back. It's basically indicating that while it's all right, they may have emotionally wanted a Ram Mandir, they may have wanted the Babri Masjid not to be there, they might have supported BJP on that. But this is not central to their lives. The central to their lives is their livelihood, education, health. All these things are fundamental to their lives. And therefore, this for them became a sideshow. That's what the election results show.
Talking about the reason for beginning Newsclick, you were telling these days the media is not concerned about movements. Why the farmers are on the street. That's why you began this kind of a portal. Now, even now, recently in Bangladesh, the students were the cause, one of the main causes. Surprisingly, these media are not talking about that aspect. Their slogan is, the so-called mainstream media, we are not in the news business, we are in the advertisement business.
As a Times of India chairman, who said that. So, Bennett and Coleman, chairman, is the one who said that. Mr. Jain, which Jain, the two brothers, which Jain said it, I forget. But that was their position. You see, two things here. I'm interrupting you, but
It's okay.
essentially, what is the economics of a big media platform? It gets its money, not from viewers, not from readers, but it gets its money from advertisers. So that's what Mr. Jain was saying, chairman of Bennett and Coleman, that we are in the advertisement business, not in the news business.
40% news and 60% ad.
But in terms of money, 90%, 95% is ads. Okay. In fact, when Times of India started 1 rupee per paper, then the Kawadiwala would give you more for the paper than what you paid for it. Okay. So therefore, you can see where he was coming from, that if I get the eyeballs, then I get the revenue because of advertisers, and television similarly. So all of this, unless you come to sports where people are willing to spend money for sports or maybe for films, but for news, they want free news. So given that where is the interest of the business houses? In advertisers. Their issue is to sell more papers, but the real issue is the money is going to come from advertisers. So they have to cater to what the advertisers want. And advertisers don't want depressing news. They don't want movements to be shown. They want to show everything is hunky-dory, go and spend money, buy my stuff. So this is why Sainath, and I quote him on this, that when all the farmer suicides were going on in Maharashtra, they still go on, there was only one person covering the rural farmers' beat. But there are 40 journalists covering the fashion beat.
Yeah, I have heard about that.
Yeah. So this in Bombay. Yeah. So why would they not talk about farmers and workers? Because what the managing director of Bennett and Coleman would say, they don't buy my paper. So why should I cater to them? So that is why when you have a strike, say in a factory, workers are on the streets, then the question that comes up, whose viewpoint do they carry? The viewpoint that this caused a traffic jam. It caused a traffic jam, so I, in my car, got stuck in traffic. So the entire workers' strike is condensed to the view of a person sitting in a car, okay, in Delhi. So this has been consistent with the farmers or workers. Farmers was a little more difficult because a lot of India, even middle class, has some roots in the villages. So the farmers have a little more sympathy than the workers have. But you can see, for a large part of the time when the farmers were protesting, news was very little. And that's why when I did start Newsclick, I really didn't want to start a media platform. I wanted to show what we should be doing. And it was more an example than trying to become a media myself. So the idea was it could be done cheaply. Studios could be set up much more cheaply than they thought. With the kind of internet that we have today with YouTube and others, we can produce channels, good quality content in terms of simple quality of the content. And lastly, we can give voice to the people who are in struggle.
Yes.
Not the leaders, but also the people on the ground who are coming, marching from long distances to come to, say, for example, Bombay. With Nashik to Bombay, they marched. They came all over India. When they go, they do a India Bandh, Bharat Bandh, the workers. When the farmers came to Delhi, all of this to hear their voices, give those voices, so people know that these are voices of the people who have demands and they are facing a struggle which they want to bring to the other people. So I think that should be the intent of media. And unfortunately, the business model of media today makes it very difficult for big media to do that. So that is where platforms, yours is one of them, but many others have to fill that gap to bring back a critical discourse into our public life, which the media, big media, a role that big media is not playing.
So, how do you feel now? You started a venture. It was a new venture, and now looking back, or at this particular juncture of time, what's your feeling about your own platform? How did it work?
Well, again, that has to be.
I have to ask one more question.
Okay.
And you were saying that while you were in jail, many of your employees were in trouble. How did you manage that? You're still,
Let me answer the last question first.
Okay.
Effectively, Newsclick is virtually shut down because you're not able to pay salaries. Again, we are in Supreme Court on that. It will take some time. But yes, for the time being, Newsclick has not been able to pay salaries, and that still continues. So it's become people only work based on voluntary labor they put in, and we can only make it do only minimal set of things as of now. So that is one part of it. Coming back to the larger question which you asked, which I'm going to ask you to repeat.
No, I was asking, you started this venture to make some kind of change as a really refreshing thing. You wanted to show people, and you wanted them to speak to the audience, to the larger public, to Indians. For example, when the farmers' protest was there, there are people who can talk really from their heart. So what's your feeling at this juncture of time? Did it succeed as you thought?
I think it was more than successful,
okay,
because it did become at least a place to go to for knowing what's happening to the farmer struggles, various struggles. So I think that worked. I think we also brought the possibility, of course now it's quite well established, that you can do much lower cost studios, and it's possible to use different instruments to be able to reach a mass audience. And individuals are doing it for platforms. So that's possible. So all of that, I think I succeeded. I'm happy that I did it. Even the cost has been heavy, both for me and my colleagues. But I think on the whole, I have no regrets. Okay, some of us will pay a price. That's what always happens. Some people do have to pay a price for change. But the point is, as an experiment, as a platform, as a demonstration, it showed that yes, this can be done. And it can be done by not only people who want to do small platforms for their interest, but also for larger, shall we say, mission of creating an awareness amongst the people that they have rights, and the right to live, right to work, right to free expression, right to education, right to health, will be at the center of any democracy in the world. And the task of media is to bring that out.
You belong to a very interesting generation. When you were young, the student protest in France was happening, Vietnam War was happening. You were telling about that in some interviews.
Yes, in my book again. I'm promoting my book.
Do it, please. Right.
Keeping up the good fight.
Yeah. Those days, which is not familiar to younger generation. Can you tell us something about those turbulent days, both in India and around the world? Hippism was there.
All kinds of protests, yes. Well, let me go back a little. Yeah. I come from what's been called the midnight generation.
Yeah, midnight.
That means we were born at the turn of when India becomes independent, 47 born. Now, of course, I think the struggles that our earlier generations had fought for Indian independence was a backdrop to what we were when we were growing up as children. Of course, we saw the after effects of that. Even our school textbooks took a long time to change because they were still talking about how the British were good and so on. But
that's quite funny.
Yeah, absolutely. The they also explained why the white races were superior because they came from cold climate, they could work harder. You know, why they took so long to become superior, of course, a question that was never asked, because all the civilization started really from Asia, if you will. So, and of course, Latin America as well. But if you leave all of that out, which still have to be sorted out, the colonial legacy we have as which still is there in different books, in the worldview that we have, and the way history is taught to us, which is Rome, Greece, and then you get age of discovery and so on. You know, industrial revolution comes as following age of reason, which all of it happens to happen here in Europe. So 1,000 years that the dark ages, when no such dark ages existed in Asia, that's forgotten. But what you get is this kind of history. It's extremely Eurocentric history. And North Africa doesn't even exist in all this. Forget about South Africa and Americas. But forgetting that, the question was that 60s, and we do talk about the 60s generation. The 60s generation came out of a sense that there was something which was wrong with the post-war development that have taken place, and there are protests in different parts of the world, and mainly student protests, students and youth protesting in large numbers. So we were also influenced by that, there is no question. But in India, we also had the lengthening of that period because of emergency.
Yes.
71 emergency provided a further impetus in India for our generation of the 70s, 60s generation to also be in the 70s generation. So I think all of that was very useful, very valuable to me growing up, because it made me look at the world differently, critically, and also the belief struggle is what changes society. And if you want to be somebody who wants to be aware as a citizen, then you have to build your relationships with the different struggles that are going on. And mass movements and struggles are the basic drivers of social change. So that's what is where I come from. And I think that basic lesson of the 60s and 70s I have internalized. And though I was a professional in engineer, as a part of the science movement, later the free software movement, and my reason for starting a digital platform was I was involved in digital technology in any case. So I thought, since most people don't know too much about this as yet, so I'll try and build some expertise and disseminate to others. But instead of that, Newsclick became itself a center, a focus of such activity. And as I said, I have no regrets for what has happened. I have regrets for what my colleagues have had to suffer, particularly the younger ones. But nevertheless, you know, it's a kind of journalism which made sense to me. It's a continuation of what I believe that I was, what went into my formative years, and also what went into struggle against the emergency.
The time you spent with us was quite informative, and we all extend our support to Newsclick. And thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us. Thank you so much.